It isn't obvious why my great-grandfather would have wanted to be a farmer. In 1924, mechanisation was still a new sight on the recently cleared southwest slopes of central New South Wales. Bullock teams with horses still pulled rudimentary harvesters, and the men and women would gather the wheat by hand. Chemical weed control would have been the stuff of dreams. The crops were ploughed by horse team before season and roughly burnt with little in the way of fire management before sowing to try and kill off whatever weed seeds remained. Their yields were minuscule by today's standards. A good harvest would see about 6 bags of wheat per acre, with which you would expect to feed about 700 people for a year. Pioneers in innovation even then, the Iandra estate was engaging in some of the first ever fertiliser trials in Australia, capitalising on the revolutionary Haber-Bosch method, which had only just emerged out of Germany post the Great War. Of the 5 to 7 million tonnes of wheat Australians grew during this period, 2 to 3 million tonnes would have gone to export, with the rest feeding Australia's still relatively meagre population. With no electricity and no refrigeration, my papa lived on salted meat and bread. And whilst he toiled and struggled, he also raised a fine family of 5 young men and women. All of his sons followed in their dad's footsteps and went on to become farmers themselves, including my grandfather, Barry. By the time Barry, my pop, was 30, agriculture was nigh unrecognisable to what his father had known. Now tractors averaged 30 to 40 horsepower, cereal farming had become almost completely mechanised, and the nitrogen and phosphorus revolutions had drastically improved yields. Pop could now expect to produce a tonne of wheat per acre, which is double what his father had produced. And by the time my dad became the principal manager of Warona, the 2,500 acre farm that he had farmed alongside my pop, big rigs were the name of the game. Dad's 1995 class Dominator ran at 205 horsepower and with its 30-foot front could cover 120 acres a day. Dad can now expect to grow around 3 tonnes of wheat per acre, 6 times that of his grandfather from the same block of land, with a capacity to feed millions of people around the world, purely from human ingenuity working to solve the challenges they faced. But today we are facing new challenges. As Western nations have pursued the elimination of CO2 by any means necessary, the cost of feeding the world has also skyrocketed. When you stop pursuing the cheapest energy possible for ideological aims, real consequences follow. Our farmers have carved out of the harsh landscape a bounty of food that has seen over 1 billion people lifted out of poverty over the last 40 years. But these trends we put at risk if alongside these price shocks we keep pushing up the price of energy and commodities, which will continue to push up the price of food. It is not too late for a better story, one that focuses on feeding people abundance and prosperity rather than doom, scarcity and guilt. With the astonishing power of human ingenuity that has revolutionised the world's ability to feed people over the last 100 years, I can only imagine what agriculture will look like when my son is old enough to take on the farm.